because the first time I've been in Tbilisi was in 1990, at the time of the Soviet Union, when I started to study here at the little film school here on Rustaveli. But speaking about all times, when I started as a filmmaker about 25 years ago, I really had no imagination how much power lies behind images and how many emotions can be triggered through that. I'm not talking about propaganda and about the conscious use of pictures, but about the unconsciousness, about the feelings, about the emotions that can be triggered. Our diversity as people lies in the fact that we all experience images out of our perspectives. That means the people around you that might have had a totally different life, that have experienced life in a different country, that were around different people, will look at the same photographs or at the same film in a totally different way. So now you didn't even see a picture, you didn't even see an image, but I think already quite a few people in this room have very different emotions about this. And this was a voice recording I did in 1991 during the declaration of independence of the Republic of Georgia from the Soviet Union, being spoken by Zviad Gamsakhodia, who was the first president of Georgia, free elect, and who very much, you can say, is a very contradictory person until this day, especially among Georgians. For some of them, his voice can be compared maybe like a voice for Germans would be if they hear a voice of Joseph Goebbels. For others, he is still a hero and the only really free elected president that this country had. So there are very, very different opinions about people, and so the picture of Zviad can trigger quite different emotions. But talking about Zviad, I met him a couple of times because at that time I was working for a German broadcaster and did some interviews. And with doing these interviews, I had some experiences where I myself understood a little bit more about the power of image. Because I was filmed doing one of these interviews by the Georgian public broadcaster, and the picture of me interviewing Zviad was broadcasted a couple of times in Georgian television because it was one of the last interviews he gave before the civil war broke out. And later, friends came to me, and most of my friends were in the opposition, and they came to me and say, "Oh, Stefan, you became a Zviadist." And I said, "What happened?" "Well, we saw you on television going and talking to Zviad, so you must have been a Zviadist, right?" Of course, it was a little bit a strange feeling for me, but I also had exactly the opposite. When I was traveling with a friend, had a visiting friend from Germany, and we were traveling with my car to Western Georgia. And Western Georgia, people who know their times know that Western Georgia was a stronghold of the Zviadists, meaning the supporters of Zviad Gamsakhodia. And we were suddenly coming in the middle of the countryside to a block post, and there were suddenly a lot of policemen and militia, armed militia with big weapons approaching our car. And now you imagine this young German fellow sitting in this little chiguli, and these people coming up with heavy weapons and knocking at your window. But then suddenly one of them noticed me. "Weren't you the guy who was interviewing our president? Please go." And they even called the next blog post, and we had a free go all through west of Georgia just because of the image of me with their president. Doing films and making images approaches people at different levels. One of the levels can be that it approaches you through the head, meaning information, like you have it through journalism or informative documentaries. Another way is doing it through the stomach, like, for example, movies do it, that they do it through entertainment and try to catch your attention and your emotions through that. And creative filmmaking and creative documentary is exactly a mixture of both. You're working with reality, you are not working with fiction, but you have the same job to do. You want to bring your audience on an emotional roller coaster. You have a story to tell with a beginning, with an end, and your idea is really to get emotions, to get the message across to a bigger audience and to share a picture. So I don't see myself as much as a journalist as I see myself as an artist. But artists usually have their paint, they have their paintbrush, they might write a novel at home, at the computer. They are very, very independent. But I have to work with my material, and my material are humans. They are living beings who have their own stories, who have their own ideas what this film should be like, how they look at a certain country, how they look at a certain issue. So my kind of art is really depending on how I can work with these people. And there are two aspects that I think are very important in documentary filmmaking. One of that is respect. you always have to respect the other person. You have to respect the person that you are working with. Often you see films where people are just being used. We want to have this sentence, please say us this sentence, and they don't even care about the person that is sitting in front of the camera. So respect is a very important part, I think, for the relationship between a filmmaker and the person that he's dealing with. And the other thing is a responsibility. You do have a certain responsibility with the material that you collect, because the person trusts you and it gives you an interview because he thinks this interview is going to be used in a certain way, it is going to be used in a certain topic, and this is also a promise that you have to give to the people in front of the camera what you're going to do with the picture. To show you what I mean, I also want to tell you that lots of people always want to show the beautiful side of themselves. They worry about the makeup, they worry about the background, they want to have a flower in the background and not an atomic power plant. So I call this the Candyland effect. That you know that probably yourself, if you take pictures of some people with your snapshots with a photo camera, that they always like to make cheese or always want to look very beautiful. They never want you to film them in a moment where they don't notice. But you probably also notice that exactly these are the moments, the most real, and they show the most reality of these people. So not always Candyland is the best land that people are in. One experience I had when I did a portrait about Babu Dadiani. Babu Dadiani was an old noble woman here in Georgia, and she was in her high 80s when I was doing a portrait with her, and she was always very much worried about her hair. Because if the hair would be loose, she would look old. She never wanted to look old, she always wanted to look beautiful. So always when we were shooting with her, she either wanted to wear a hat or a hairnet. And one time when we were filming her, her hairnet got loose and fell down piece by piece. And in the end, exactly this was the moment. It was shot on camera. We didn't intend it to, but the camera was running. And in the end, it ended up in the film, and it showed so much warmth and so much nice moments of her that it was really a very, very important moment for the film. So exactly the moment that was not Candyland was, in the end, the warmest moment that she could have. But it always depends what you do with the material. There are people of public importance that never really can control where the cameras are and what is happening with the pictures that have been taken by them. We all know that there, for example, presidents suddenly start eating part of their outfit, and then these pictures are really the pictures that if you Google their name, then these are the pictures that come up in the internet. So sometimes things that happen in picture and images can be so powerful that they can be used in quite different ways. So what I want to say with this is that the trust and that you establish between people is a very, very important part of creative documentary filmmaking. So my job is always to make people trust this guy, meaning, of course, myself, that I always have to tell my own story. If I want to have a private story of somebody, I also open up myself. If I only need a political statement, nobody cares. But if I want somebody to tell me his love story or the story of his parents or a story that is very intimate to him, then he also has the right to hear very private stories of me, which I always try to tell. But I wanted to talk a little bit also about the responsibility, as I said, that this is an important part. And a couple of years ago, I made a film in Yemen, in the city of Shibam, which is in Hadramaut. And Hadramaut is an area of Yemen that is very, very Islamic and very, very strict with Islam. The grandfather of Osama bin Laden comes from that area. And in this city of Shibam, for example, women are not allowed to walk out in the streets only on certain hours of the day. And of course, totally covered, so you really don't see them. And we tried, of course, by doing a portrait of the city, also to get interviews with these women. And an international women's organization helped us, that they finally agreed that we would be able to shoot an interview with them in one house at a corner someplace, that we as a film team would have to be there 2 hours early, and that nobody ever in the Hadramaut area would be able to see this interview that these 3 young women would give us. So we agreed to that, and just to show you the importance that meant for them is, for example, that women are not even allowed to go to their neighbor's house if they cross the street. So if they want to exchange some things like plates or like things with neighbors from another house, they put it into a bucket and then this bucket is pulled over a rope from one house to the next. So this was really a very, very delicate issue for these people, how that they would talk to strangers and even to strange men from a foreign country. In the end, we made the interview. It was a quite interesting interview, and they were quite open in the things that they told us. The only problem in the end for me, the editing room, was that I always had to find out which sound came from which woman, because you never really saw that, and this was really a difficult thing during the editing process. The film was quite successful. In the end, it also didn't only sell in Europe, and Al Jazeera was interested in the film. And I was really happy that I had invested the money and made a second version of the film. So the film was seen in Arabia, but it was seen entirely without that interview. But talking about responsibility, I'm not only talking about the responsibility that you have to individuals, but also the responsibility that you have to a certain country, especially if a country is small like Georgia and is not well known. I made a film called Caucasian Banquet about Georgia in 1991, and this film was different portraits of people that were sitting at a feast, at a Georgian feast. But there was one person at this feast who didn't really fit. She was Armenian, and she is swearing in Armenian. She is well known in the city among artists because she is a live model. Her name is Jana, and she was sitting here at the table. And one time this film was screened was at a film festival in Biberach. Now Biberach happens to be the friendship city of Tel Aviv in Kakheti. And right at the time when we had the film screened in Biberach, there was a delegation from Tel Aviv visiting Biberach. And everything went fine, they were all in the cinema. But then when they saw the live model working and they saw this picture, they started to leave the cinema under protest and saying, this is not Georgia, how can you show this, how is it possible to present our country like that? So in the end, they ended up leaving the cinema, and I was quite happy that there were also Georgians in the room and in the cinema who lived in Biberach and who lived in Germany, and who after the film were discussing the issue that has been shown in the film with them outside on the door, and tried to convince them that it is great to show this part of Georgia. It is great not only to show choirs, it is great not only to show the most beautiful parts, but to also show ideas, to show creativity, to show things that can be controversial, to show where Georgia already is. So I switched this picture that you don't think that Stefan is only making films about women, either with Chador or without anything. And another film that I made sometime later was this film called On the Edge of Time, about male domains in the Caucasus, so totally different topic. And one of the things that I want to tell you with this film and the experience that I made was I was shooting there in Ushkuli, and I opened up the people because I was living with them for almost a week before the film team came, so that I could open them up, and they really, I got them crying, I got them screaming, I got them arguing with each other, and all in front of the camera. So it was really a very, very important experience for me. And then at the editing table, we edited this film for about a year. It was very interesting how I got an even closer relationship to these people. And what you do in creative filmmaking and in creative documentary, you are forming the character, not in a script like in a fiction, but you're forming them on the editing table. And sometimes, I may exaggerate a little bit, but sometimes you feel like being God. Because you, as a filmmaker, you are creating a person, you are creating a life. You are deciding whether the farmer, whether you show him how he's working on the field, or whether you show him peeling potatoes with his wife. You are showing him whether he is only being very loud and he's being the macho at home, or you're showing him cry. So you are making the decision for millions of people who will watch this film, what kind of person this is. And suddenly you feel yourself, oh, that's how the person is, and you believe it. And then you go back to this town and you see the people, the person in natural in front of you, and you find out, oh, he's totally different than I thought he would be. And so suddenly you don't even know what is reality. Is the reality the person that I have been living with on the editing table for a year? Or is this person that I just met now for 5 minutes is the real person that I'm talking about? So creative filmmaking can be a quite interesting process. But right now I have come back to Tbilisi not only to make a new documentary, but also to enter the world of fiction. Because you know that, of course, fiction films also will set their mark and show an image of a country. One of the films recently made and with a budget of almost $12 million, financed with sources close to the Georgian government, is well known. And I don't really want to talk about the artistic value of it, but, or whether it was a financial success, which it wasn't. But it definitely did put this country on the map of a lot of people who watch action films. I never thought of that, but when I was last month in Germany, I met 2 or 3 people that had never seen my documentaries. They had never seen art house movies of Georgia from the 1980s or the 1990s, but they had seen that film and they knew where Georgia was. So that was something that this film accomplished. What image it showed? That's the question. What image does this mean for you? A film like Amélie. For me, it means Paris. For me, it means love. For me, it means colors. This is southern France. It is Chocolat. It's a film that shows me, how sweet something is, how nice, how a fairy tale can be in the countryside. These films have become like business cards of the area where they have been shot. And now of people who know Tbilisi and who know a little bit the area, don't we have a beautiful old city in Tbilisi? Don't we have the grapes of Kakheti? The beautiful songs. There's a lot of material in this country. And there's one very sweet thing, and there was always one very sweet shop that everybody knows in Tbilisi, especially the old generation, where you were able to drink juice, where you mixed your lemonade right in front of your eyes. And this is a story that has nothing to do with communist times or anything, because it started well beforehand. It started before the communist times. The recipes of Mitrofane Laridze, who was doing this lemonade, is just, you can say, a very important part of Georgian history. And we always have to keep in mind, if you talk to people, to strangers outside of Georgia, you probably have found out the same thing. Almost not many people know about Georgia. Not even many people know that in Georgia there is wine. Even less people know that there is mineral water from Georgia, which is quite famous, and almost nobody knows that there was a Georgian Coca-Cola being developed in Georgia. And the idea in the end to show that there was a mysterious drink that has been developed in the back room of a juice shop on Rustaveli that could have changed the whole history of this world. That's the image and the next image that I want to show with the film that I'm right now developing with Georgian scriptwriters and Georgian producers. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's put Georgia on the map.